To start the season, the Pistons were the laughingstock of the NBA. Seemingly nothing went right, including the play of Cade Cunningham. He struggled to create any efficient shots, was turning the ball over at a high rate. You get the idea. However, in mid-December, things really started to click for the former #1 pick, and we're left with this sort of tale of two seasons. Over his first 25 games, he was averaging 21-7, but while turning the ball over 4 times. More importantly though is the efficiency, just a putrid 46% from 2 and 32% from 3, with one of the worst true shooting percentages in the league. Detroit's offense directly felt the effects of a struggling #1 as they produced just a 107 offensive rating during his minutes. And in 24 games since then, it's night and day. He's averaging more points and assists on considerably lower turnover rates. The efficiency has taken a leap in all facets to the point where he's actually been above average. And of course, that's made the Pistons better, almost a 10-point improvement offensively. This is not the same Cade Cunningham. Typically, when we talk about young stars, the first thing we point to is a standout athletic trait or physical tool, but that's not really Cade's calling. He's not a super explosive athlete. You won't see him leave defenders in the dust with a lightning quick first step, or launch off of 2 feet to finish over the top of shot blockers. You also won't find him changing directions with incredible agility, or shredding defenders with quick twitch movements. Instead, his driving game is very much cut from the same cloth as a guy like Luka Doncic, using the change of pace to beat defenders off the dribble. He's amazing at controlling his momentum. On this one, he starts a right-hand drive with Derek White in his airspace, and slams the brakes for a little stutter before continuing, which leaves him with a wide-open lane to the rim. He's got a really crafty handle to go along with those sharp changes of speed, this time threatening a drive left, only to cross back to his right and attack the baseline. Here's another example. His initial driving angle gets taken away, so he stops on a dime while pulling back to his left, only to cross over again, and that's just high-level slashing. It could even be something as simple as a hesitation to get him the advantage. All he needs is about half a step or so by his defender because he's very lengthy. Even more important though is the sheer size. He's officially listed at 6'6", with a very filled out frame, so he's a lot bigger and stronger than your typical point guard, meaning that when he isn't able to win that half step, he can still go through most defenders. When it all comes together, the change of pace, craftiness, size, and strength, you get these possessions where Cade just sort of forces his way to the rim regardless of how well he's defended. Here's another example. His first attempt at a drive gets shut off, so he resets, tries again, throws a counter spin back towards the middle, but with a packed paint, he instead chooses to step back into a jumper. This right here is his bread and butter. Anytime he looks to drive and either gets cut off or there's no space, he can fall back on a truly incredible mid-range game. I talked about how he'll go through defenders. That same technique helps him create space on jumpers with the classic bump into a step back. He's also got that craft though, so on a play like this where it doesn't seem like there's a lane to attack, he throws a nasty spin towards the middle before using an escape dribble to create a wide open look. Remember that tale of two seasons I earlier mentioned? Well, that really stands out when looking at Cade's mid-range numbers. Over those first 25, he attempted about 8 mid-range shots per game. Great volume, but only made 39% of them. A big reason for his lack of overall scoring efficiency. And since then, he's still attempting about the same amount, except now he's converting over 50% of the time, and that's right around where the best mid-range scorers in the league tend to land. I don't think it's some mid-season leap as a shooter, but more so a level of composure and most importantly shot selection. He isn't settling for long twos or contested looks nearly as much, instead picking his spots and patiently working with his live dribble to hunt for open space. From there, everything else I talked about kind of falls into place. This really stands out when he's operating in the pick and roll. If his defender gets caught trying to chase him over the top and the big is back and drop, of course he'll just pull up for a jumper. And if the big's in drop, but his own defender stays attached to his hip, that's when you'll see him weaponize his change of speed, coming to a stop and pulling back into a quality look. If the big comes up a bit higher, not letting him turn the corner, he'll often snake the screen so that he can hunt for space on one of the elbows. Again, it's all about patience, reading the defense, and picking his spots. Turner's up in a high drop, so Cade attacks the space, and when he gets to about the elbow, you're going to see him hesitate before continuing as he eventually gets to the baseline for a bucket. Or how about this one? Porzingis is back in that drop with White attached to his hip, so he slowly but surely works his way to the middle of the paint. And because White's on his right side, instead of pulling up for a jumper, he goes to a left-handed floater. That's tough. His ability to work his way to the middle of the paint like that really puts bigs in tough spots. You don't want him to have a short mid-range jumper, but as soon as Capella steps out even an inch, it's an easy lob over the top. And here's one from earlier in the same game, except this time he fakes the lob, takes an extra step, and wraps it around Capella to create another easy 2. As a result, defenses typically don't want Cade operating in that in-between space and would rather meet him early, but he's got counters there as well. Of course, when bigs are up a bit higher, that puts them in a more vulnerable position to deal with his change of pace driving. And he's really good at weaponizing that threat by starting drives, then keeping his dribble alive to make that second defender commit as he waits for his roller to get downhill. Now feels like a good time to mention that he's already one of the best lob passers in the NBA. It's all about anticipation. Right here is where he recognizes that the lob will be available, and he places the ball perfectly where only Wiseman can get to it. Another thing I want you to focus on is how many different ways he's comfortable releasing these passes. This time he's moving to his right and hooks it over his head right on the money. You'll notice that all of these deliveries are timed perfectly. On this one, the second defender is late to switch, and again, look at the variety in his release, tossing it up from his left hip with the exact same result. In addition to those above the rim finds, he's got a nice on the floor passing game. Once again, the defense switches, but with no available lob, he creates an angle around the hip of his defender to bounce it through a tight window. Here's another example. He turns the corner with speed, forcing the big to step up, creating just enough room for a beautiful shovel pass that leads to free points. This next one's a real similar play, except now you're going to see a third defender slide over to protect the nail, so he kicks it to the wing for a great look on a spot-up triple. To make things even tougher on the defense, they'll often set up these actions off of movement. Once again, the big steps up, and there's that patience as he perfectly times up a lob pass. This one starts with the exact same setup, except now he's going to use the roller as a decoy to collapse the defense, leaving Bogdanovic all alone on the wing for an easy 3. I think he has especially good chemistry with Jalen Duren in these spots. Duren understands Cade's patience and will time up his role accordingly. Notice how he stays in position to screen as he waits for the attack, and the result is one of those elbow jumpers. In the event that Cade isn't able to create a shot he likes on the first go-around, he'll reset the two-man game with a quick give and go, and a second attempt usually leaves him with a decent look. Those little flip actions have become a go-to for them. This time his defender goes under the screen, which leaves him with room to fire off a 3. This right here is the key. He's already been one of the best pick-and-roll scorers in the NBA this season, 7th at just under 10 points a game, and although .92 points per possession might not sound too efficient, it is in the 66th percentile. And when you consider things like team situation and spacing, or how lackluster his start to the season was, those are some impressive marks. That's all happening while he's not really utilizing the 3-ball much. On occasion, you'll see him come off a screen and pull an open space, or create some separation with a step back, but he much prefers to operate inside the arc. On the season, Cade's attempting 2 off-the-dribble 3s a game and making less than 33% of them, and I think this could be an X factor in determining how high his ceiling as a creator actually is. If he adds even a semi-consistent pull-up 3, it opens up everything. He'll have access to easier driving lanes, getting to either the rim or those mid-range sweet spots with more consistency. Defenses will be forced to play him a little differently when he's out in space, which will open up more passing angles. And in general, the efficiency of his scoring would just take another step forward. I also think outside shooting will determine his ceiling as an off-ball player. He already spends a decent amount of time spotting up, has shown incredible instincts for relocating or filling out space, and it really just comes down to whether he can make shots or not. On the season, he's at about 38% on over 3 attempts a game, and if you just look at a stretch since the start of December, that's up to over 39%. A pretty solid number. If he gets to a point where he's consistently drawing closeouts, that opens up an entire new world of opportunity playing off the catch, where defenses are right back to dealing with his playmaking. So, just to quickly recap some of what I've gone over in terms of strengths. We're talking about a jumbo-sized point guard with a great handle who can get to the rim and is a surgical mid-range scorer. He's more than comfortable attacking different coverages in the pick and roll, where it feels like he's limited to no type of passing read. And he's already improved greatly as a shooter since entering the league, so if that continues to trend upwards, we're talking about a pretty scary offensive player. With that said, there are still a couple of other things I want to briefly mention. First is how much of a matchup problem Cade can be for teams with smaller guards, like Chris Paul for example, just taking him to the block and creating an easy bucket. Or the Knicks with Brunson, to avoid that mismatch they're forced to double and a simple kickout leads to a wide open 3. In addition to the matchup problems, that size also gives him access to angles as a passer that smaller guys can't get to. This time he's doubled in the corner and finds a cross-court dime to an open shooter on the wing, which leads to a warm-up jumper. But I think it's worth noting that although he's improved drastically over the season, he still has some of those head-scratching possessions. Sometimes you'll see him try to manipulate a defender to open up a passing window, and when it doesn't work, it'll lead to some pretty avoidable turnovers. Another problem he'll run into is leaving his feet without a plan, getting caught in the air and forced to hunt for a bailout. If he can trim out some of that fat with the sort of passing ability he's already showcased, we're talking about one of the best playmakers in the entire NBA. And that's the thing, he's only 22 years old and just 125 games into his career. There's more than enough time for him to improve in key areas, which he's shown throughout his 3rd season. As the situation around him gets better and he elevates individually, we're talking about a serious offensive star who's just scratching the surface of what he can be. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Cade. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.